Hello everyone, Loremaster of Sotek here, back with another battle replay, which like I said, I'm going to be doing my damnedest to have them up on a daily basis. So we're doing Lizardmen versus Skaven, and as many of you are probably aware, today's been pretty busy because we had 2 streams of Blood Bowl and Dawn of War 40k, but I wanted to get in some Total War. So looking at the army comps real quick, this battle was kind of an interesting one. So I took a pretty typical anti-Skaven build. I brought Kroq-Gar on Grimlock with all of his items and abilities. I'm trying to get better at using Kroq-Gar because I do think he's a very competitive player, but quite frankly my skill with him has kind of fallen out a little rusty, so you might anticipate seeing him quite a bit. I've also got 2 units of Temple Guard guarding my flanks, hopefully to deal with Rat Ogres and Doom Wheels. Then I've got 2 Saurus Warriors to just chop some Skaven up, and I brought them without shields just to save a little bit of cost. I have 2 units of Skin Cohorts with Javelins. My favorite use for them is kind of to chuck a few volleys, typically at Rat Ogres, just to do quite a bit of damage, and then you can use them to just chase off units. And then I've got 2 units of Skinks and 2 Stegodons with giant bows, or regular Stegodons, rather. One of which has a chevron to make him a little, just the tiniest bit more accurate. As for my opponent, he has a very interesting army here. He has 2 units of Rat Ogres, 1 on each flank. He has 2 units of Night Runners, 1 on each. Then he has a unit of Warp Fire Throwers, which I think most people consider them pretty bad. But, I mean, I fought some today in the Flash tournament on Turin's channel, and they actually performed pretty well against me. I think if I were to play them again, you know, well, I don't know. I don't really think they're that great. More of, I think they just caught me off guard that game, because this game, you'll see, they're not that super difficult to deal with. And it's just because they have such low armor of 40. Their leadership isn't super great, and they don't have like missile resistance or anything to protect them. So with a fairly low health pool and fairly low armor, they're just really easy to kill. Then he's got an assassin hidden here with his Rat Ogres, who has slippery trophy heads and concealment bombs. Then he's got a couple units of clan rats with shields on the outer flanks, 4 units total, and then 4 units of halberds. Stormverm with halberds, and then 2 Skaven Slave Spears to defend his Plague-Claw Catapult, and of course his Warlord. So let's go ahead and kick things into gear. So I see the Plague-Claw Catapult, and I realize that he's probably going to focus my high value units like my Temple Guard and Saurus, and I also immediately sent the Stegodons up to start hot-shotting it. The Plague-Claw Catapults and the Warp Lightning Cannons are larger than most artillery pieces. They have a pretty wide frontage as well, so they're fairly easy to hit with bolt thrower-like weapons, and bolt thrower-like weapons will destroy them rather quickly. Though this game, my Stegodons seem to have struggled quite a bit more against the Plague-Claw Catapult than I expected. Here, I sent out kind of a small flank force to combat his. Obviously, I couldn't see the assassin, but I could see everything else, and I figured 1 unit of Temple Guard was pretty much enough to hold these guys together. Here's where I see the assassin, which if you have like Temple Guard, because they have the predatory senses rule, Saurus and Temple Guard, they have a higher range of detecting hidden units. So at this point, I basically just start pulling back all of my high value units and splitting them up so the Plague-Claw Catapult just can't get good value against me. And I kind of just set these 2 skink units aside to hopefully harass these guys and keep them busy. Meanwhile, I send Kroq-Gar over here and just start getting aggressive. And my opponent, interestingly, doesn't really counter me. Like, what probably would have been really good for him right now is to just immediately start moving forward, since my forces are split, and to take advantage of that. But I think he's a fairly new player at the game, because you'll notice that his micro suffers a little bit. So anyway, so he kind of comes back for me here, and I start just putting a lot of damage into these Rat Ogres. I had these guys on the flee stance, or skirmish stance, so they kind of had a weird reaction when I was trying to give them command, so I turned it off and they started working better. Kroq-Gar comes in here and just misses, like literally just jumps over them. But he comes back on in and starts kicking some ass and taking names. And you'll notice these Warfire Throwers, they get a good volley on Kroq-Gar, and they do like a good 200-300 damage. But I dropped a baby Wind Blast, so not an Overcast Wind Blast, but a regular Wind Blast, and it literally took him down to 50% health. So, you know. At this point, the Red Ogres break because the Temple Guard kind of get into them, and the Assassin comes in to the wrong party at the wrong time. He does send over some Clan Rat with spears for the anti-large, but he really needs to commit a significant... He should have sent at least a halberd and both spears over here to combat this. So I just kind of plow through this, not giving a damn, and just am going to go slam into these guys and kill a bunch of them, which of course is going to cause terror. And since the Rat Ogres broke, I literally just dedicate this unit of skinks. I turn off their fire at will, and I just have them melee chase them off the field. But you'll notice, kind of what I was talking about earlier, is that he hasn't done anything. Like, I'm keeping my army kind of like this because I'm waiting for him to attack me, but he just doesn't. For the longest time. Like, here he starts moving a little bit, and you'll see me respond in a second. But he runs his Lord in, and the Warlord is just going to get the crap kicked out of him by Kroq-Gar. Even with an Assassin and stuff. There, I unleash a Hand of the Gods as he's retreating, which is, in my opinion, the best time to use it. Because usually people, when they're running away, aren't too busy trying to dodge left and right. So you can actually get, like, a straight line shot on him. He gets a little bit of friendly fire, unfortunately, with that Plague Claw Catapult. I unleashed another Wind Blast on this Warfire Thrower because I'm kind of scared of it after that last game I played in the tournament today. This Assassin, despite his reasonable melee defense, is just, I mean, well, granted it's 35, but he is just getting trounced up by Kroq-Gar. And at this point, he starts committing more forces to the fray, but this still isn't enough to beat this unit of Temple Guard. Like, the Temple Guard alone could take on these 3 units. Like, you have to attribute some pretty substantial defenses. So anyway, he starts surrounding me with anti-large again, and the Night Runners start throwing things at me. And at this point, I realize, okay, my opponent is not going to come to me. Like, I guess he's just going to sit back, even though I have superior range. So I just waited till I ran out of ammo. And at this point, I kind of just gave up on the Plague Claw Catapult, and I started focusing my giant bolts on the Storm Vermin. Which you'll see, I mean, that killed, what, 8 guys? Yeah, that kills about 7 to 8 guys a volley when they're at max stretch out. So with them out of ammo now, I'm like, alright, I might as well charge. The Night Runners, in conjunction with the Storm Vermin and Clan Rats, actually did some pretty considerable damage to Kroq-Gar, but of course, being Lizardmen, I just start healing. I do throw down a Curse of the Midnight Wind to make the Storm Vermin much less effective, and pretty much can just run Kroq-Gar along the outside. The reason I start cutting through here is because I have a Blessed Spawning of Itzel, which I save for just a second because I see that he's coming back in for a countercharge because he's hoping to get us around. I'll pop that, pop all my buffs, so Deadly Onslaught, Sacred Spawning, everything, and just plow in. Just get trophy heads on me though when I'm charging really nicely. But that was an Overcast Wind Blast, and it just deletes all the Skaven. So he pretty much has to fall back. Meanwhile, the engagements have started over here. Stegodons have plowed into the Storm Vermin and being supported by Saurus and the Temple Guard. At this point, all of this stuff breaks, other than the Storm Vermin, who break shortly after from Terror. And Kroq-Gar is just going to turn around and go... whoop. And down goes the Warlord. He just falls apart. And when he goes down, that causes pretty significant leadership problems for the Skaven. So pretty much all of the Clan Rat or Skaven slaves, they just instant break from the general die. Like, they're just gone. Especially because of the Stegodon's Cosmic Care. And one thing I did this game that I admit I've been really bad at lately is cycle charging. So what I'm trying to do with my Stegodons is I pull them out and then charge them back in. And then pull them out and charge them back in. Trying to really take advantage of that charge bonus of 70, which is so huge. You know, that really adds to their, about 30 melee attack. Here, he's trying to chase me off, but, you know, Skink with blow skirmishers can shoot 360, so they're just pinging these Rat Ogres. And I started to turn around, but my opponent decided to surrender the match, which I can, you know, makes sense. He didn't really have any serious options left. He didn't have a way to kill the Temple Guard, and most of his stuff was starting to rout from Terror, and I was just going to be able to cycle charge in my Stegodons. But great game to Ivan. Going over the screen here, just looking at all this, Kroq-Gar did extremely well. Obviously, he put the Warlord in a trash can and was able to tear up the Rat Ogres and get them to terrify and run away at a fairly low or a fairly high model count. As you can see here, they still had more than half the unit's models, but they got terrified by Kroq-Gar and ran a bad direction, so my cheap little unit of 400 cost skinks just followed them off. The Temple Guard on the right performed extremely well because they had the support of the Skink Priest and Kroq-Gar and 2 units of Skinks. They were easily able to just destroy anything he could throw at me. Apologies about that. Of course, the Skink Priest did exceptionally well. Wind Blast is a must against Skaven. Skaven have to go wide to even stand a chance most of the time. And Wind Blast is very good against anything that's not like a Doom Wheel, a Hell Pit Abomination, or Rat Ogres. Anything else, it's a fantastic spell. And it's really good as a counter to summons. Like, if you know you're going up against an opponent who's taking a Plague Priest, one of the things you can do is if you have the situational awareness and reaction speed, you can literally throw down Wind Blast when the little tunnel comes up to let all the Skaven out, and it will kill the entire unit in a single blast. Just use the Undercast version. You don't need to use the Overcast for the Clan Rats or Plague Monk summon. But yeah, so he got a ton of kills and did really well, and that Curse of the Midnight Wind prevented the Storm Vermin from doing anything effective. You see the most a unit got was 5 kills. The Plague Claw Catapult seems to be a lot tougher than the Warp Lightning Cannon. Either that, or it's been so long since I've played competitive multiplayer that the Skaven artillery has just gotten a lot more health, maybe. But, I mean, I wasted almost all of my ammunition onto this thing, and I still only killed 2 of the catapults. Like, he still got 62 kills. The Stegodons, of course, performed really well. This one even managed to gain a Chevron. They blew up most of the Plague Claw, and then they fired a couple of pot shots into the Storm Vermin, and then, of course, they charged in and caused lots of terror and all sorts of other stuff. Which is the nice thing about the Stegodon, is that even if you manage to burn through your ammo, it's still an incredibly useful model. And then the Saurus and Temple Guard absolutely kicked the shit out of the Clan Rats, Slaves, and Storm Vermin. Storm Vermin can hold off Saurus, or Temple Guard, though the Temple Guard will usually beat them up pretty badly. Saurus will generally lose to Temple Guard in a one-on-one, but Storm Vermin with Halberds especially really struggle in those infantry matchups. Storm Vermin with Sword and Board is much better for dealing with Lizardmen, in my opinion, unless you're, obviously building for anti-monster. For my opponent, he just needs to work on his micro a little bit, which I've been there. I'm still there. I still have crappy micro. If he had charged his entire army forward right at the beginning and immediately started closing in those pincher flanks, then I would have been really overwhelmed. It would have been hard for me to deal with all 4 Storm Vermin units while also having 2 Rat Ogre units coming up behind me and, all that stuff. So, Ivan, if you're out there, thanks for the game, man. My only advice is just be more aggressive. Be way more aggressive. If you outnumber your opponent, and especially if your opponent has stronger range than you do, Plague Claw is not going to win against Stegodons in most matchups, just run. Go aggressive, surround your opponent, take him out. But thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you next time. Bye.